you can see Donald Trump was able to hold up pretty strongly in some of the subjects in regards to the economy and immigration. He was able to hold up well enough to where even voters decided to break to him even after the debate, despite her being the favorite to win in the media polls. So that's also kind of interesting as well. And looking at this, guys, we're going to show you something very interesting that should be studied because this is very fascinating to look at. I mean, right now, when we look at this, we can see that, you know, right now, when it comes to this, we see in the debate, right, independents were sort of breaking towards Donald Trump during the debate. And this is not a Fox News, sort of thing. This is what they did. They basically got a panel of voters with Republicans, independents, and Democrats and put together a group of people. And what they do is they have these dials. And so essentially, what they ended up doing is if they're watching the debate and they like what Trump's saying, they have a dial and it goes to Trump. And if they like what Harris is saying, it's going to go to Harris. You'll see it on the screen here. And basically, when he's talking about, they want they want change from what's happening right now. One of Trump's most powerful statements, you are Biden. So I believe this is, at a point where he's talking about some
mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime, and it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
So this was his segment on, this was a segment on illegal immigration. And you can see that independents were tracking with Republicans during the debate. And when you look at these in 2016, they were also tracking with Donald Trump in 2016. In 2020, independents tended to track with Biden by quite a bit on most of the topics when you look back at the debate as well for that election. And so what's very fascinating is that right now in this debate, Donald Trump, I mean, the independents are tracking right with him. They're literally tracking right with him. It's pretty amazing to see that happen. I think it's fairly interesting. And so now, after the debate, we've seen multiple polls where undecideds break to Donald Trump. There's even a Michigan poll that came out that Donald Trump improves quite a bit with some of the undecideds. I was even surprised to see how well he was doing with some of the undecideds. I also thought that was fairly interesting. And so looking at this, it's very fascinating to see that Donald Trump is appealing to independents in this way. And if he even wins independents outright, it's gonna be amazing. I mean, it's just gonna be incredible. And so because if he's really winning independents, there's basically no chance he'd lose the election just because of the way the math works. I mean, Biden basically won them by 14 last time. And so if he's even tied with them or winning them by a point, that's a 15-point shift. And you have places where you're talking about, being 45% of the electorate like Maine and New Hampshire. I mean, if he's tied nationally with them, New Hampshire and Maine are going to be close. And in my polling averages, they're competitive. Now, I did go ahead and kind of went through my averages today, and I found some very interesting stuff. Georgia seemed to narrow up quite a bit, but the undecideds went up tremendously. And again, I have to add more polls into the average. There's not enough. There's like 3 polls. I have to add more. Some of the polls that I had to take out were already about a month old. So, I had to take those out of the average. But right now, Donald Trump is looking really good when it comes to some of the state averages. Georgia is about a tie now And again, it only has like 2 or 3 polls. I have to add more, but the averages that have like a lot of polls, like 5 plus or 6 plus, he gained in Arizona this week. He actually gained there. And again, their internals right now, the CNN reported that the campaign literally basically said that North Carolina looks better to them than Arizona. I mean, fundamentally, from a state trend perspective, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because North Carolina has been voting to the right of Arizona recently. And so if Arizona's looking that bad, that's a problem for them. And what's very fascinating is that my polling average, Arizona is actually voting to the right of North Carolina. North Carolina and my average kind of trended today. Someone's sending who's texting on point. It's actually Tom Ellsworth from the Patrick Bet David podcast. He's the one who's texting me right now. I forgot to turn off my ringer, but he's actually the one who's texting me right now. I'll go ahead and probably lower. I'll go ahead and put my do not disturb on so it doesn't keep interrupting. But yeah, no, that was Tom from the Patrick Bet David podcast. So, oh, by the way, guys, I timed out the political chatter because he just kept like he wasn't even being productive in chat. Like he was just saying, "Oh, this is brain rot, dude. If you're gonna be insulting me in my chat and you're gonna take away my credibility, you don't have to be here." I mean, that's why I timed him out. If he wants to come back and be civil and actually write constructive criticism and say, "Look, hey, I don't agree with this," that's fine. But if he's gonna say, "Oh, this is brain rot," I'm not gonna put up with it. So clearly independents are tracking with Trump on some of these things, and it's looking good. I mean, he had a lot of people really. I mean, there's a lot of polling that shows he picked up undecideds, even the filmed focus groups from the mainstream media. I mean, he's gaining people from those focus groups. And when we look at this, I put this together, actually, Steve Turley actually mentioned me in his show today, which was really cool. I very appreciate that, Steve. If you're out there, I don't know if you're watching now, I doubt it, but I appreciate you mentioning me. He's a political commentator who has 1.2 million subscribers. So that was huge. And he actually went over this today. And so when looking at this here, we're going to pull this up, right? And this is something I want people to see. I posted this on X. It was blowing up. Even Robert Barnes actually even shared this on his feed, guys. Even Robert Barnes posted this earlier today, and it shows that Donald Trump is on track to win. When you look at the polling averages from RCP and you look at the current swing, so about 6 points to the right of where it was last cycle, you look at 538, you look Biden plus 8.4, now it's Harris plus 2.8, almost an identical shift. My polling average for 2020, I went back and created it from October 2nd to November 2nd using the same polls that I have in the polling average right now. Biden would have been up by 5.3. That would have been more accurate than most aggregates. Trump right now is up by 2.3 in my average. And when you average out those shifts, I mean, it shows a 7.6 shift. When you average out those shifts, you get a 6.3 percentage point shift in the electoral college. And when you apply that shift to the Biden popular vote, Trump is up by 1.8% in the popular vote, which is not that far off from what I have in my forecast, in my model. And if you were to do a map based on that Trump plus 1.8 map, in the popular vote, this is what you get. Donald Trump gets 313 electoral college votes, and he's very soundly defeating Kamala Harris in the electoral college right now. And it's looking really, really good for him. I mean, it's looking great. And so, I mean, it's pretty amazing to see that when you do simple analysis like this, it is very easy to see where the election is going. Even Robert Barnes commented saying that this is something that is a pretty predictive metric. I mean, once the 2020 polling average was voting to the left of where it was beforehand, you could have known that that race was effectively going to be over, essentially, for Trump. And looking at this now, it is a good sign. Now, is this going to be the exact map, or is the popular vote going to be Trump plus 1.8? Probably not. I mean, it's not like an exact science, but it is a good indicator of where things are headed. And he seems to be the favorite to win the popular vote. I mean, and what I did as well, I actually stayed up last night and I ended up creating these polling averages for the 2020 states as well from October 2nd to November 2nd as well. So I did the same thing for the state level. And you guys are really going to find this interesting because he is the polling in 2020. If I would have done these, they would have been basically spot on. I mean, if you look at these, look at that map, guys. That's what my polling map would have showed. The states I would have had are Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Virginia. Those are the states that I did the polling averages for, and I applied the 2020 electorates to them. And when you look at that, if I would have gotten all those electorates right in 2020, this is what the raw data would have looked like in my polling averages. And I would have been able to predict a Biden 306 electoral college prediction based off my polling averages. Now, Nevada's tilt blue because the polling data there tends to skew to the right and they tend to oversample Republicans by quite a bit. But I mean, it's pretty much the best you would have gotten. Texas plus 5.8. I mean, that's like literally less than half a point off. Florida would have been Trump plus 2.7. That's like less than a point off. Looking at North Carolina, that would have actually been exactly Trump plus 1.3, like on the money, exact. Arizona would have been like a little bit over 2. Georgia would have been a little bit over 1. Would have looked a little bit like the 538 averages. But Wisconsin would have been Biden plus 2.5. I mean, that's better than most of the averages you would have seen out there. And looking at Pennsylvania, the same thing. I mean, Biden plus 2.1, that's like basically less than a point off. Michigan plus 3.6, again, less than a point off to the left. I mean, it still overestimates Biden in a lot of these states, but overall, he's doing, these are fairly accurate. New Mexico, Biden plus 14.9, that's a little bit lofty, and there's not a lot of polling for that average. Virginia, Biden plus 5.3. That's a one that has like an egregious polling error. That would have been a pretty bad aggregator. But looking at my polling averages right now, if we apply this same methodology and we weigh for the electorate slightly righter than last time because voter registration is up for Republicans in all these states, if you apply the new electorates that I have plus the polling data right now, this is the map you actually get based on my polling averages. And by the way, I actually updated my polling averages, and he's actually up in Virginia by a point. Now in Georgia, now it's a tilt margin in Georgia. Again, it's probably because I don't have enough polls there. Like I literally have 2 or 3 polls in the aggregate. I'm going to have to add more. But overall, he's doing fairly well in some other states. I mean, he expanded his lead in Arizona. North Carolina is like a 4-point lead for him now, which makes sense considering that they were saying Trump probably has, they were saying that they feel better about North Carolina than Arizona. My polling average in Arizona, if I could pull it up, is not looking great for them. It's really not. They're looking bad in Arizona. Right now, Trump is at over 50%. And he's up by 7.5 in my average in Arizona. It's atrocious. And I'm waiting for an electorate that's like half as red as last time. So very interesting. But again, it's looking really, really weird in some of these polling averages. And in North Carolina, Trump is now up there by a little bit less than 4 points, about 3.9% roughly, based on the stuff that I added in today. So that is basically matching what their internals are, which Arizona is looking worse for them than North Carolina. That could happen if Donald Trump is really doing that much better with Hispanics. If he's outperforming with Hispanics by that much, then maybe Arizona is going to vote to the right of a lot of these swing states. And it could very well possibly be Harris's worst swing state, funny enough, despite it trending to the left last cycle. Those Hispanics may move it. And Wisconsin's not looking any better either. I mean, Wisconsin right now for Donald Trump, in my average, he's up there. He's actually above 50%. He's up there by 5.9. Now, what's interesting is Michigan. I only have 4 polls in the aggregate. So again, I may need to add more polls. I just got rid of polls today that were older, but Harris is up by about 1.6%. And I have to add more. Like the final 2020 polling average has like 8 polls for Michigan. This right now has like 4. I need to add more. But overall, it's looking pretty good for Donald Trump. I mean, if he's winning Virginia instead of Michigan, it basically cancels it out. And he's still up in New Hampshire. I mean, the poll that I removed today, he's now up by like a tilt margin in the average, but he's up. He's up now. Again, that's not my official forecast. I do have an official forecast on onpointpolitics.com, which we will get to in a second. But overall, Donald Trump, I mean, comparing those polling averages, again, mine were pretty accurate. I mean, if I would have retrospectively gone back, which is what I did, I retrospectively plugged in all the numbers. This is what I would have gotten for all of those states. And that is fairly impressive. I mean, that's impressive. A lot of people in 2020 wouldn't have been able to construct these polling averages that are this accurate. I mean, no one would have been able to do it. And so now when you see it's a huge difference. And like Wisconsin, right? Like, for example, let's look at this, right? Biden plus 2.5 in 2020 was my average. And now Trump's up by 6.5 in the last update. That's an 8-point shift to the right. You want to know what the polling error for 538 was last cycle? It was roughly a little bit over 8 points. It was an 8.1 polling miss there. In RCP, 6-point polling miss. It's definitely possible that we could have that polling error. And it seems like from all the work that I've done, I mean, I'm weighing to an electorate that's probably slightly redder than 2020 because voter registrations for Republicans are up in every state except Colorado, or at least they've netted registration in every state except Colorado. But when you're looking at this, Donald Trump is the favorite to win the election now. I mean, it's as clear as day. I mean, he is killing this map. New Mexico is relatively competitive too. Whoever's telling you it's not is a fool because Donald Trump nationally is doing way better with Hispanic voters. And Nevada, in my average, is now a little bit over 5. So again, whoever's telling you that New Mexico is not going to be within 5 is just being silly because if you think about it, it makes sense. Donald Trump is doing so much better with Hispanics nationally. And New Mexico always has the highest share of the Hispanic electorate that any state does. So it only would make sense for that to be the case. And Trump even gained with Hispanics in New Mexico compared from 2016 to 2020. The only reason why he underperformed with them or underperformed in the state was because of the white vote shifting to the left, which Biden only won by a single point. So it's like, it's not looking great for Harris in a lot of these battlegrounds. And if Trump is just winning Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia based off, just based off the 2020 states, if Trump is just picking up Georgia and Pennsylvania, it's over. He's got 270 electoral votes. So his path has never been clearer than ever before. I mean, it's as bright as day that his path is very clear. And the bad news for Democrats is the North Carolina mail-in data that we got in terms of the mail-in request is looking very atrocious. Like, it's looking really bad for them. Like, I wouldn't have thought it would have been this bad, but it seems like my hypothesis may be correct. I mean, when you look at that, you see that in 2020, the request 52% Democrat to Republican 17. I mean, that's a big gap in terms of party registration request. That's down to 39% Democrat and is now up to 23% Republican. And yes, there's going to be less of them, which is not even good for them either. But they're still getting requests. But the fact that the lead has essentially been cut in half in the mail-in vote is not great for Democrats at all in the state of North Carolina. I mean, if Trump's winning North Carolina by 6 to 8 points, which is the range I have it in, Mark Robinson's probably not going to lose the governorship because a 6 to 8 point win in North Carolina would just be pretty big.